Chapter 4 of Book 1 of Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rachel Weaver. Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel Florence Hapgood. Book 1. A few pages of history. Chapter 4. Cracks beneath the foundation. At the moment when the drama which we are narrating is on the point of penetrating into the depths of one of the tragic clouds which enveloped the beginning of Louis Philippe's reign, it was necessary that there should be no equivoque, and it became requisite that this book should offer some explanation with regard to this king. Louis Philippe had entered into possession of his royal authority without violence, without any direct action on his part, by virtue of a revolutionary change, evidently quite distinct from the real aim of the evolution, but in which he, the Duc d'Orléans, exercised no personal initiative. He had been born a prince, and he believed himself to have been elected king. He had not served this mandate on himself, he had not taken it, it had been offered to him. And he had accepted it, convinced wrongly, to be sure, but convinced nevertheless that the offer was in accordance with right, and that the acceptance of it was in accordance with duty. Hence his possession was in good faith. Now, we say it in good conscience, Louis Philippe being in possession in perfect good faith, and the democracy being in good faith in its attack, the amount of terror discharged by the social conflicts weighs neither on the king nor on the democracy. A clash of principles resembles a clash of elements. The ocean defends the water, the hurricane defends the air. The king defends royalty, the democracy defends the people. The relative, which is the monarchy, resists the absolute, which is the republic. Society bleeds in this conflict, but that which constitutes its suffering today will constitute its safety later on. And in any case, those who combat are not to be blamed. One of the two parties is evidently mistaken. The right is not, like the Colossus of Rhodes, on two shores at once, with one foot on the republic and one in the royalty. It is indivisible, and all on one side. But those who are in error are so sincerely. A blind man is no more a criminal than a Vendean is a ruffian. Let us then impute to the fatality of things alone these formidable collusions. Whatever the nature of these tempests may be, human irresponsibility is mingled with them. Let us complete this exposition. The government of 1840 led a hard life immediately. Born yesterday, it was obliged to fight today. Hardly installed, it was already everywhere conscious of vague movements of traction on the apparatus of July, so recently laid, and so lacking in solidity. Resistance was born on the morrow. Perhaps even it was born on the preceding evening. From month to month the hostility increased, and from being concealed it became patent. The Revolution of July, which gained but little acceptance outside of France by kings, had been diversely interpreted in France, as we have said. God delivers over to men his visible will in events, an obscure text written in a mysterious tongue. Men immediately make translations of it, translations hasty, incorrect, full of errors, of gaps, and of nonsense. Very few minds comprehend the divine language. The most sagacious, the calmest, the most profound decipher slowly, and when they arrive with their text, the task has long been completed. There are already 20 translations on the public place. From each remaining springs a party, and from each misinterpretation a faction, and each party thinks that it alone has the true text, and each faction that it possesses the light. Power itself is often a faction. There are in revolutions swimmers who go against the current. They are the old parties. For the old parties, who clung to heredity by the grace of God, think that revolutions having sprung from the right to revolt, one has the right to revolt against them. Error. For in these revolutions, the one who revolts is not the people, it is the king. Revolution is precisely contrary of revolt. Every revolution, being a normal outcome, contains within itself its legitimacy, which false revolutionists sometimes dishonor, but which remains even when soiled, which survives even when stained with blood. Revolutions spring not from an accident, but from necessity. A revolution is a return from the fictitious to the real. It is because it must be that it is. None the less did the old legitimist parties assail the Revolution of 1830 with all the vehemence which arises from false reasoning. Errors make excellent projectiles. They strike it cleverly in its vulnerable spot, in default of a cuirass, in its lack of logic. They attacked this revolution in its royalty. They shouted to it, "Revolution, why this king?" Factions are blind men who aim correctly. This cry was uttered equally by the Republicans, but coming from them, this cry was logical. What was blindness in the Legitimists was clearness of vision in the Democrats. 1830 had bankrupted the people. The enraged democracy reproached it with this. Between the attack of the past and the attack of the future, the establishment of July struggled. It represented the minute at loggerheads on the one hand, with the monarchical centuries on the other hand, with eternal right. In addition, and besides all this, it was no longer revolution and had become a monarchy. 1830 was obliged to take precedence of all Europe. To keep the peace was an increase of complication. A harmony established contrary to sense is often more onerous than a war. From this secret conflict, always muzzled, but always growing, was born armed peace, that ruinous expedient of civilization which in the harness of the European cabinets is suspicious in itself. The royalty of July reared up, in spite of the fact that it caught it in the harness of European cabinets. Metternich would gladly have put it in kicking straps. Pushed on in France by progress, it pushed on the monarchies, those loiterers in Europe. After having been towed, it undertook to tow. Meanwhile, within her, pauperism, the proletariat, salary, education, penal servitude, prostitution, the fate of the woman, wealth, misery, production, consumption, division, exchange, coin, credit, the rights of capital, the rights of labor, all these questions were multiplied above society, a terrible slope. Outside of political parties properly so called, another movement became manifest. Philosophical fermentation replied to democratic fermentation. The elect felt troubled as well as the masses, in another manner, but quite as much. Thinkers meditated, while the soil, that is to say the people, traversed by revolutionary currents, trembled under them with indescribably vague epileptic shocks. These dreamers, some isolated, others united in families and almost in communion, turned over social questions in a pacific but profound manner. Impassive miners who tranquilly pushed their galleries into the depths of a volcano, hardly disturbed by the dull commotion and the furnaces of which they caught glimpses. This tranquillity was not the least beautiful spectacle of this agitated epoch. These men left to political parties the question of rights. They occupied themselves with the question of happiness. The well-being of man, that was what they wanted to extract from society. They raised material questions, questions of agriculture, of industry, of commerce, almost to the dignity of a religion. In civilization, such as it has formed itself, a little by the command of God, a great deal by the agency of man, interests combine, unite, and amalgamate in a manner to form a veritable hard rock, in accordance with a dynamic law, patiently studied by economists, those geologists of politics. These men, who group themselves under different appellations, but who may all be designated by the generic title of socialists, endeavored to pierce that rock, and to cause it to spout forth the living waters of human felicity. From the question of the scaffold to the question of war, their works embraced everything. To the rights of man, as proclaimed by the Revolution, they added the rights of woman and the rights of the child. The reader will not be surprised if, for various reasons, we do not